Hey, what's up? Look into that booger that you just left into the Kleenex from your nose. There are little speckles and stars inside of that booger, didn't you notice? Yeah, let's get weird about things. Just kidding. But it's a reality because there are little galaxies inside of specks over the cells that are within everything that's around us all the time. Think about it. If you look microscopically into billions of times beneath us into microscopes, there is life there. These are little galaxies and universes. Indeed. What is the purpose of mentioning this? Oh, yeah. Here we are mentioning the news. Here we are. Dinky Tehc, welcome in. Thanks for coming in. Yeah, let's move along. All right, so what are we talking about today? One of the first mentions conceptually is The Waking Life, the movie. Yeah. So with that in mind, it's somewhat like combining that and like the use of sound from different functions, from different spaces and places, in other words, and little galaxies inside of tissues that are sneezed inside of Kleenexes. Those also have sounds that are peculiar and such, and Dinky Tehc, indeed, it turns to search the most peculiar ends of the galaxy and inside of tissue, booger galaxies as well, to be able to find weird sounds from all around, to be able to try to make like punk symphonies, for example, if possible, if it's possible maybe to get better at recording and such, and finding more peculiar sounds that sort of jive and vibe with this whole process. But the thing that combines in an interesting way with the Waking Life, the film, is that it's not just like about making, conceptual, peculiar conversation types like the Waking Life film, but also adding sound, and also like this is kind of like the news, so it's kind of like things that happen on a concurrent basis and such things, that if you find weird sounds like the sound of galaxies inside of a booger inside of a tissue paper, for example, we want to try to use that and also contextualize that maybe into the news in the future. It's aspirational, perhaps, if you could say, I suppose you could say, in terms of, and also like doing conversations that are like the Waking Life, for example. Oh yeah, another conceptual good consideration is using more wireframes to be able to forecast different items of energy flow and conceptual directions of thought, in terms of where all the types of conversation should go or would be going, or projections on little bits of paper and such things that can also be added within this podcast. It is somewhat of an interest to do that as well. And also, remember those little interesting images called 3D images? Yeah, those were kind of cool. You know what I'm saying? So in a similar fashion, it's almost like taking the depth and the mindset of peculiar imagery and being able to sort of forecast that into the wireframe networks of types of thought, being able to think that way using wireframes, thinking, and also 3D imagery, 3D images, like those 3D image books where you would have to stare at it for a long time, then blur your eyeballs, and then be able to try to find things in between the imagery. Seeing things similar to that, peculiar conversations like in The Waking Life, and also the wireframe situations with being able to have to blur your eyes to be able to find the depth within them. It's like reading in between the lines in essence, but having wireframes to be able to try to connect energy, and then things kind of come out in between the lines from once those peculiar items are drawn, similar to the peculiar sounds that are drawn, and hopefully all those things circular in a circular fashion are be able to connect to each other on an ongoing basis as we try to continue to connect peculiar dots, indeed, from hopefully getting some better tools along the way as well while doing this podcast as well. And also we want to add the Waking Life in concurrence with the spiritual finance mentality, with the sound mentality. So it's Waking Life, spiritual mentality, as well as sound, meaning like SRF, which is like self-realization fellowship, which is the combination of science and spirituality, and combined with philosophy in the Waking Life, and combined with sound making and such things, as those things can currently happen on a day-to-day basis. So we want to blend those things into a bowl, as well as the news, which is in essence comprised of these similar types of things on a day-to-day basis anyway. So we just are trying to add more things to the pot in terms of future casting for the cast, what the forecast of the podcast is trying to be like, in essence. And so thanks for hanging in there. And we want to have little trinkets like jewels and jewelries and such things that can also be part of the games to be able to help guide focus and thought and mantras and spiritual concepts, and in a big way have SRF type of jewelry so that there's symbolism, and if you're holding it, touching it, something interacting with it, that it can be spiritually empowering to a certain degree, because it causes a mantra of and focus of thought to be able to flow in a certain direction, be able to continue to stay on track with the direction that things were meant to be going. to happen in a certain respect, if that makes sense. In another light, it's sort of peculiar, I would say indeed, that there's, in any given second of any given day, within the mind frame of mentality, an ability to make many multiple choices, almost to the extent where it's extremely overwhelming, almost 1,000,000% overwhelming, if you really, really dial it in and conceptualize all the directions that you can walk in any given second. If you just stop right away what you're doing right now and focus on the idea that in an essential sense, you can in essence draw 2,000 arrows in 2,000 directions that you can then move your body in from that next second that you decided to choose, in that exact moment, in that exact second, in that exact instance, that in any instance, in that same instance, it is possible to transpose that instance into another one and make those exact 2,000 decisions in any given direction. And at the same time, it's similar with connections and frequencies and wavelengths and choices of thought and focuses of energy and such things, which is similar to attention and such things as that, and such things as circles, something called circles, which is something which correlates to fulfilling potential, or finding potential in an unfulfilled potential market, which in essence is like empty circles, which means it's like potential to be done, things that can happen necessarily, but they're not happening, and that in essence correlates to frequencies and in essence wavelengths, to be able to just find certain things that are able to correspond to given potential and opportunity and such things. So circles in this instance stands for unfulfilled potential, but at the same time wavelengths and having the ability to choose attention on 10,000 different wavelengths at any given time also speaks to opportunity, and that's almost at the higher echelon of choices to be able to focus on, at least in terms of what this world wants to feed us in a mass-produced sense or in the mainstream sense, or in a generalized sense. It almost takes a little bit of work to be able to find a little bit of higher focuses, to be able to find the higher rewarding thoughts that are also frequencies in terms of tuning in and to trying to channel out some of the ones that are not necessarily the most favored frequencies, to be able to focus on higher level ones which are actually rewarding on the back end in terms of monetary energy. They reward with monetary energy if they're like good little business thoughts, wavelengths, to be able to try to tune into those, to be able to try to get back monetary energy in exchange for thinking about those higher sort of echelon thoughts, because you're providing value to other people. And the bottom line is to be able to have so many to choose from, it's ideal to be able to acknowledge and recognize some of the higher abilities to think about certain elements that relate to business in terms of focuses on thoughts and circles and such things, because the circular example of a circle is to be able to focus on circular concepts which have the ability to just, in a almost self-explanatory sense, have value. When you think about the idea of what the label of the circle is, in essence, it's a certain valuable item. It's just, simple as something like the value of the wheel before the wheel was invented. Once you think about what the wheel is and what the wheel does, and once you see it drawn on paper, then the value sort of explains itself, it writes itself. And thinking about those types of things, because there's a lot of opportunity necessarily in the world, there's a lot of gaps, there's a lot of problems, a lot of things that people need necessarily, and so being able to think that way and fill into that mindset of just different circles and different things that are unfulfilled necessarily around the world, it's similar to being able to walk in 10,000 different directions at any given time from 10,000 different arrows being around you necessarily, and it's a bit overwhelming, it's very interesting, it's peculiar, it's very strange that you can have all those options at any given time, at any given second necessarily, but it's also ideal to be able to realize that at the same time, and it's also very unique, because at the same time, you can pick up the phone and you can call 10,000 people at the same time. You can research the internet and use that, and you can call 20,000 people by having the research and a certain dialed-in focus and an ability to choose certain directions through almost like your heart, using like the heart to be able to try to find a certain pathway and try to develop a line to be able to develop a certain element of focus in terms of communication and continuous communication in terms of doing that and repeating it and trying to continue to go in certain directions and then picking up paths where you left off from before and from the day before, and then finding little tidbits and trails and leaving breadcrumbs for future interest for places to turn and where to go. It's all very peculiar and interesting. If in terms of selling something as well, there's a lot of choices. So yeah, in essence, using the phone, having the idea to be able to connect with different energies and wavelengths and ideas and focuses, and also people, is very peculiar, and it causes an interesting reflection on the idea of life and actually living in of itself, and it's almost like a peculiar rewarding item in of itself, just acknowledging that idea of that many choices at any given second, any given time. It's like just an idea that causes appreciation, in essence, for life in of itself, for having those choices, because it's just crazy to have all that in front of you necessarily, and also it's sort of nice to have that empowerment to be able to acknowledge and realize that type of choice just in front of you at any given time, because so many people are obviously out there, and they're also connected to different wavelengths and in and of themselves and the network. And if you just have the opportunity to acknowledge, look up, and tap in, it's a very peculiar way to acknowledge any given choices at any given time, which is very almost overwhelming. It's pretty overwhelming. It's very overwhelming indeed. It's nice to be able to tap into it and then tap back into things that are tapped into for you, so you can just have that realm of thought be etched out for you, and then switch back and forth to the infinite choices on the other hand, and then kind of go back and forth and use guidance, and then on the other hand go back into the infinite pool of choices and then get lost into those as well, because it causes constructive thoughts on the other hand. And at the same time, it causes energy flow visualizations, so you can just visualize many visualizations as you're visualizing consistent energies and wavelengths, and it causes new energies and morphisms and such things to form on their own time, and it's all just energy creating in and of itself, but you have to tap into it just by thinking about it and acknowledging it and realizing it to begin with. That's about all, just acknowledging and thinking about it and giving it attention, the different choices and matters, and by just opening up the internet sometimes and being able to go in directions for contacting different people and actually contacting them, so that you actually connect with the wavelength energy in a similar fashion to how we want to try to expand and extend the messaging in the world for everyone in the world to play with each other to make the world a better place, and then try to help solve the world's problems by just collectively having global giving games that help everybody, and then at the same time stepping that up to reading markets and using that visualization of energy reading to be able to read markets in weird ways, so that you formulate your own postulations and peculiar hypotheses about markets in different ways and trends and energy, basically statistics from around the world. This has to do with, in essence, spiritual finances, acknowledging every statistic in the world and trying to conceptualize and make visualizations from just reading trends, data, statistics from every corner and every ability from every direction that's possible, taking statistics, picking them up, throwing them in the air like dirt or sand and such, and then recounting them and then making them fall in different directions and different patterns, just like a 3D imagery picture to begin with, because not everyone always sees the same with 3D imagery. Sometimes different things pop out from the woodwork, and if you have the ability to just jump onto that wavelength train, then it's kind of cool, and this helps for all of things within people to help along with the unfulfilled potential market to start to be fulfilled. And there's different people as well that you can tap into their energies, and they can help open up certain vessels within you, and their energies are more correlative to your energy, so it's good to be able to be semi-mindful sometimes of those type of people that open up your vessels somewhat and speak to your heart sometimes, or help you speak to your heart by you speaking to them, and it comes out sort of organically or easily, and just recognizing those people and those types of energies in those people, perhaps, where it's reciprocal energy that you see in yourself through them, and that type of thing is kind of neat sometimes if it can happen. And hopefully there's a good cyclical circular energy from the end of this little podcast chat situation news thing at the end of this time that we've spent together. Thanks again. Cheers. Hopefully it wasn't too irritating or annoying to listen to this type of rhythm that's been repeated for about 10 minutes. Thanks again. Cheers. Bye. Take it to peace. Dinky Tehc, peace.